It was a quiet Sunday morning with sunlight streaming in through the windows. Kim Bennett was making breakfast in the kitchen. The toaster filled the air with an appetizing aroma, and the coffee pot was bubbling with a comforting sound. A simple but lovingly prepared breakfast of seasoned scrambled eggs and seasonal fruit was being laid out on the small dining room table. "Mom," 12-year-old Emma ran down, holding a flyer for a ballet recital. The light pink paper displayed gold letters announcing the performance of Sleeping Beauty next month. The silhouettes of ballerinas in ballet tights danced across the page, symbolizing Emma's dreams. "Emma, don't run up the stairs," Kim advised softly as she patted her daughter's head. "But I'm so happy for you. Your father would be proud too." Emma's expression momentarily turned somber, but quickly regained her bright smile. Ever since losing her husband in a car accident 2 years ago, Kim had been living and supporting her daughter. Their weekend breakfast had become an irreplaceable ritual for both. As a tax accountant, Kim earned $70,000 a year and lived modestly in a small house in the suburbs of New York. Although there was no mortgage, thanks to a large insurance compensation, they could not afford luxuries given the ballet classes and Emma's education expenses. Still, their bond was strong, and they lived happily together. Meanwhile, a very different morning was unfolding in a mansion in the exclusive neighborhood of Westchester County. "I don't like the color of these curtains. Replace them," Diana Williams ordered in an imperious tone. Throughout her life, she was aware of the glances of high society. The weekend parties that hosted heavyweights of politics and finance were routine, and every time, the mansion was adorned with new antique furniture and works of art. She reigned as the queen of social circles. Since she lost her husband, controlling her daughter's life according to her wishes had become her reason for living. "Mother, could you please do the last check on the wedding flowers?" Amber was sitting on the couch with her smartphone in hand. Although she worked as a nurse at New York General Hospital, it was simply for show. Her annual salary of $42,000 could not maintain the luxurious lifestyle her mother provided for her. In reality, she depended on her mother for most of her living expenses and lived according to her wishes. "Of course, dear. It's your special day." Diana smiled with satisfaction. Amber's fiancé, John Carter, held the title of Vice President of Carter Investments. He was a successful businessman who had built his fortune through dedication to work and lived in a luxury apartment. This marriage was expected to further elevate the Williams family's social standing. At the Grand Plaza Hotel, preparations for tomorrow's wedding were reaching their final stages. The ceremony, with a budget of $3 million, would host 1,000 guests, including government and business dignitaries. A wedding dress worth $100,000 had been commissioned. Everything had to be perfect. As staff members made final checks on the ceremony preparations, a seating chart was open on an office desk. In the far corner of the back row, Kim and Emma's names were written in small print, symbolizing their position in this lavish wedding. The main hall of the Grand Plaza Hotel sparkled like a white jewel box. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the 10-meter ceiling, catching the morning light and creating rainbow reflections. An arch of white roses and pure orchids adorned the altar, while rare orchids from prestigious New York families lined both sides of the aisle. The air was filled with the fresh fragrance of gardenias and jasmine. "Everything is proceeding as planned." Wedding planner Jessica Morris nodded in satisfaction as she completed her final check. Over 100 staff members were already in position to serve the 1,000 guests. Politicians, businessmen, and the social elite filled the guest list, which read like a who's who of New York high society. In the kitchen, chefs were busy preparing specially commissioned plates of roasted Wagyu beef and lobster thermidor. Bottles of Romani Conti, priced at $10,000 each, were carefully transported from the wine cellar. Everything was tinged with extraordinary luxury. An hour before the ceremony, Kim and Emma were led through the back entrance. "Mom, it's so beautiful." Emma gazed at the rose arch with sparkling eyes. Her light blue dress, which Kim had bought by working overtime, was not expensive, but it matched the color of her eyes perfectly. Around her neck hung a small pearl pendant left to her by her late father. "Our seats are over there." Kim took her daughter's hand and headed to the back row. Walking down the aisle, she sighed deeply several times. Why did they have to be treated this way at her sister's wedding? Yet she tried to keep a smile in front of her daughter. The majestic sound of the pipe organ filled the place. The guests entered first to the sound of the wedding march. The audience gasped at their designer attire. In the bridal suite, Amber was hurrying through her final preparations. Her $100,000 wedding dress, designed by Vera Wong, enveloped her like delicate snowflakes. Thousands of hand-sewn crystals sparkled in the light. Perfect, Diana looked at her daughter with satisfaction. Rather than motherly love, her expression showed joy that her plans were succeeding. She radiated a regal dignity in her custom-made dress, adorned with a $1 million Cartier tiara. The ceremony proceeded solemnly. The guests held their breath at the bride's pure white dress. They shed tears as the couple exchanged vows and applauded the exchange of rings with blessings. John flashed a proud expression at his company executives, fully understanding the influence this marriage would have on his career. As the reception began and the champagne was poured, he whispered to his mother, "Mom, I need to go to the bathroom. Will you be well alone?" "Yes." Emma walked out into the hallway, where guests were chatting in small groups. With posture trained through ballet, she walked silently to the bathroom. The scent of expensive perfume and typical upper-class conversations floated around her. Then, a sudden scream echoed through the hallway. As Emma turned around, a violent slap hit her cheek. Diana's ring left a small cut on her face. "Why did you spill wine on the wedding dress?" Diana's scream stopped all conversation. A large red wine stain spread across Amber's pure white dress. The silk fabric and lace were stained red, as if bleeding. I did nothing." Emma's anguished scream echoed through the silent hallway. Her cheek was red and swollen, and tears filled her eyes. Her hand trembled as she grabbed her father's pendant. "Call the police," John shouted. "This dress costs $100,000. We will demand compensation." His voice had an almost expectant tone. "Wait." Kim ran and hugged Emma. "My daughter. I would never do such a thing." In the middle of the chaos of screams and exclamations, a member of the hotel staff stepped forward. His name tag said Michael Collins, head of security. "We can check the security cameras." At those words, the color drained from Diana E. Amber's face. That won't be necessary." Diana's voice trembled, her lips twitching under her perfect makeup. "It's not necessary," Kim declared firmly. "Let's review the footage to prove my daughter's innocence." While the guests surrounding them murmured, the group headed to the security room. Emma trembled in her mother's arms, repeating, "I didn't do it." The security room at the Grand Plaza Hotel was normally off-limits to unauthorized personnel. The dimly lit room had monitors covering an entire wall, displaying all areas of the hotel. Sarah called the manager and immediately gave instructions. Chief Michael Collins, with over 20 years of experience in hotel security, instinctively knew this situation exceeded routine operations. Minutes later, the manager quickly walked in. Although he was over 60 years old, the piercing gaze of this British gentleman reflected crisis management skills honed through years of experience. "Please explain the situation." The manager's voice echoed through the silent room. Kim hugged Emma while Diana, Amber, and John stood against the back wall. "Yes, I will review the footage of the hallway incident." Michael quickly operated the keypad. The large monitor displayed the hallway scene, Emma calmly walking towards the bathroom. Then, 2 minutes later, the manager frowned. The footage showed Amber and John standing at the end of the hallway, seemingly avoiding attention. John pulled out a small bottle and poured something on Amber's dress. Immediately after, as if it was planned, Diana appeared and slapped Emma as she passed. "We have the evidence," Michael declared quietly. The room fell into an icy silence. "This is a misunderstanding." John raised his voice. "The footage must be tampered with." "I'm sorry, but our hotel security system has anti-tampering features," the manager replied calmly. "All footage includes timestamps and digital signatures." "Mother, why?" Kim's voice was shaking. Diana momentarily met her daughter's gaze, but quickly looked away. Amber sat slumped, shoulders shaking with tears. "Should we contact the police?" the manager asked sternly. "This is an attempt at fraud and assault." "Wait," Diana shouted. "We can settle this through discussion. I can prepare the money." "You deliberately saw a 12-year-old girl and try to frame her." The manager's voice turned even sterner. "This is not something that can be resolved privately." The security staff moved quickly to seal the emergency exits and main entrances of the hotel. Simultaneously, additional guards were placed in the reception hall to prevent chaos. Our plan, Amber whispered desperately. Plan? Kim looked at her sister. Is there anything else? At that moment, the phone rang. John's smartphone. He checked the screen anxiously, and his face changed color. Hello, yes, I understand. After hanging up, John slumped in a chair as if giving up on everything. It was from the insurance company. They have discovered the fraud. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Insurance fraud? The manager emphasized every word. They were planning to cover the wedding costs with the insurance money. The police officers arrived one after another and began the interrogation of those involved. The detectives confiscated the hotel's security camera footage as evidence. Diana, John, and Amber were taken to separate rooms for questioning. Emma, are you okay? Kim gently stroked her daughter's cheek. Although it would leave a scar, fortunately, the wound was not deep. Yes, Emma nodded lightly. But why did Grandma and the others do such a thing? Kim had a hard time finding words for that question. Could she help her innocent daughter understand the ugly desires of adults? Sometimes people make wrong decisions, she replied softly. But you chose to live honestly. Your father would be proud. Emma nodded silently, clutching her father's keepsake pendant. Hours later, the police investigation revealed shocking facts one after another. William's estate was essentially bankrupt, and Diana was in huge debt. Carter Investment was also in crisis due to John's fraudulent accounting. The $3 million cost of the wedding was planned to be fully covered by insurance money. The damage to the dress was part of the insurance fraud, and they thought no one would suspect them if they framed Emma. What a foolish plan, the detective shook his head. As Kim and Emma walked out of the hotel at dusk, the setting sun gently embraced them. The extravagant wedding was over, and the guests had already left. Mom, said Emma, looking up at the sky. What will happen to us now? We will be okay, Kim replied firmly. We have something more important than money. They began to walk hand in hand. The spring breeze caressed their cheeks gently, as if announcing a new beginning. Meanwhile, the Special Investigation Unit at the New York State Police Headquarters kept its lights on until late at night. The mountains of documents on their desks revealed shocking facts one after another. Carol, take a look at this file. Chief Investigator Mark Davis spread out a thick file on his desk. With 20 years of experience, this veteran detective had never seen a fraud case of this magnitude. Fraudulent accounting of William's estate, Carter Investment, stock manipulation, multiple attempts at insurance fraud. Davis counted on his fingers. Plus assault and defamation of a 12-year-old girl. This is not just about an incident at a wedding. District Attorney Carol Rayton frowned as she looked through the file. Specializing in cases involving children, she was particularly interested in this case. What is the total estimated damage? Preliminary estimates exceed $50 million, Davis replied. William's estate has been inflating sales figures with fictitious real estate transactions for the past 5 years. There are hardly any real assets left. A complex cash flow chart was displayed on the investigation room's big screen. Dozens of related companies and personal accounts were intricately connected, centered on Diana Williams. The problem is motive, continued District Attorney Rayton. Why execute such a high-risk plan at this wedding? The answer became clear during Amber Williams' questioning at police headquarters. Amber began to tell everything, despite the advice of her lawyer. My mother was on the verge of bankruptcy. Her voice was shaking, but she couldn't accept it. She was afraid of losing everything. Her position in society, the trust of her friends, everything. Just the sound of the interrogator taking notes resonated in the silent room. Then John appeared. He seemed to have the perfect solution. Amber's eyes filled with tears. Cover the wedding costs with the insurance. Use those funds to rebuild the company. My mother's company's debt, her company's fraud. It was all supposed to be resolved in another room. Wyan Carter had lost his composure. I am the victim, she screamed, pounding the desk. Diana tricked me. I knew nothing about the investment fraud. However, the email records found on her computer and smartphone showed different facts. The suspect, Carter, had been systematically running frauds for 2 years. Detective Davis flipped through the documents. He artificially manipulated the investment firm's stock prices and swindled about $20 million from individual investors. Diana's interrogation was the longest. She maintained her arrogant attitude until the end, but she couldn't resist the evidence. Yes, The company was in trouble, shrugged Diana. But using that girl wasn't planned. It was spontaneous. The security camera images say it all, the interrogator declared in a low voice. The plan to incriminate Emma was prepared at least a month in advance. Conversation history found on the smartphone confirmed that the plan to trap Emma was meticulously recorded. 3 weeks later, in the New York State Supreme Court, the courtroom was packed with spectators. Media access was restricted, but many reporters gathered in the hallway. Kim held her daughter's hand tightly as she watched the members of her former family. Prosecutor Rayon stood up and began to explain the details of the case in a measured tone. This case is not simply an attempt at insurance fraud, she continued, scanning the jury. It is an inhumane crime, an attempt to sacrifice an innocent child to protect social status and vanity. The evidence presented in court was extensive: hotel security camera footage, detailed records of cash flow, messages and emails between the parties involved, financial analysis reports from accountants, and diagnostic reports from victims' psychological counselors. Our client has contributed to the local community for many years, pleaded the defense attorney. Her actions were a lapse in judgment, temporary, due to financial difficulties. However, the prosecution's rebuttal was sharp. The defendants attempted to use an innocent girl to cover up their crimes. Prosecutor Rayon's voice grew stronger. This was not an accidental incident, but a planned crime. After 3 days of deliberation, the time for the verdict came. Diana Williams, 7 years imprisonment, fine of $5 million. John Carter, 10 years imprisonment, fine of $10 million. Amber Williams, considering cooperation with the investigation, 3 years imprisonment with 5 years probation. Further orders: the defendants must pay compensation to the victim for medical expenses and emotional distress. The amount of compensation will be determined in a subsequent civil trial. After sentencing, Prosecutor Rayon visited Kim and Emma. You did well. She put her hand on Emma's shoulder. Your bravery revealed the truth. Emma nodded lightly, holding the souvenir pendant of her father. She looked out the window. The spring sunlight was shining, as if heralding a new hope. Then it was over. Kim sighed deeply but smiled softly. Your new life is just beginning, the prosecutor reassured. The evening light fell softly upon the mother and daughter as they left the courthouse. The visiting room at the New York State Women's Correctional Facility was always shrouded in silence. The light streaming through the iron bars created geometric shadows in the room. The visiting time is 15 minutes, the voice of the guard indicated. Amber entered nervously. Her white nurse's uniform created a strange contrast with the gray walls of the prison. Mother and daughter faced each other across the table in the visiting room. Diana Williams, once the worthy queen of a real estate dynasty, had lost her former glory. Sitting there in prison clothes, she looked like any other elderly inmate. I'm glad you came. Diana's voice had lost its former arrogance. 2 years into her sentence, she spent her days working in the prison library, reflecting on her life. The luxurious mansion, her position in society, it was all now part of the past. How's work going? It's going well. I'm working in the pediatric ward of the General Hospital. Amber nodded lightly. They'll open a new ward soon. They'll let me have my oceans in my care. There was pride in her voice, something she'd never felt before. On parole, she had begun to walk her true path as a nurse. Leaving behind her mother's dream of marrying a rich husband, she was making a life for herself with her own hands. Have you seen your sister, Emma? At that question, Amber looked down. Not yet. I'm waiting for the right time. I wrote a letter congratulating Emma on her promotion. Meanwhile, in a quiet residential area in the suburbs of New York, the spring breeze blew pleasantly through Kim and Emma's new home. Congratulations, Emma. In the starlit living room, a small party was being held to celebrate Emma's leading role in the ballet recital. Her classmates chatted while enjoying homemade cupcakes. Now at 14 years old, Emma had grown up quite a bit. The scar from that incident had become almost invisible, thanks to the treatment of an excellent plastic surgeon. More importantly, Kim was happy to see that the shadow of anxiety had disappeared from her daughter's expression. Mom, look, Emma showed her smartphone. I applied for the program at Juilliard this summer. That's wonderful. Kim hugged her daughter. Your father would be so proud. Emma touched the souvenir pendant of her father and smiled. After the verdict, They were able to buy a new house with the insurance company's compensation and secure funds for Emma's education. Though modest, it was enough for the two of them. Kim had built a solid reputation as a tax accountant and had also begun volunteering for an organization that protected children's rights. Her experience was becoming a source of support for families in similar situations. That night, after Emma's party ended, she sat next to Kim. "I wonder how Grandma and Aunt Amber are doing." Kim decided to answer her daughter's question honestly. "Grandma is in prison, facing her mistakes. I heard Aunt Amber has started a new life as a nurse." "I see." Emma looked into the distance. "I don't hate them anymore. I just feel sad, you know." Kim's eyes filled with tears at her daughter's words, which showed so much maturity. "But we have something important, don't we?" Kim took her daughter's hand. "Not money or status, but a real bond." Emma nodded silently. Outside the window, the stars twinkled softly in the night sky. Meanwhile, in New York State's maximum security prison, John Carter was writing a letter in his cell. "Dear Board of Trustees." Even though he was incarcerated, he was still plotting ways to regain his lost wealth and status. Yet, no one responded to his letters. Time kept flowing, and people changed. Diana had begun volunteering to read books to children from poor families in the library. Gone was her former arrogance. She spent her days in silence, atoning. In the hallway of the pediatric ward, Amber gently reached out her hand to a child who had lost both of his parents. Her eyes no longer held any trace of their former pretense. And Kim and Emma had both gotten into the habit of enjoying picnics in the nearby park every weekend. Though simple, their time together was filled with smiles. "Hey, Mom." Emma looked up at the sky. "Maybe happiness is closer than we think." Kim felt a warmth at her daughter's words. Expensive dresses, lavish weddings, social status. None of that had been true happiness. What mattered was here. Hearts that cared for each other. The courage to live honestly. Above all, an unbreakable bond between mother and daughter. The spring breeze carried the breath of new life. It was like the whisper of Los Angeles, bringing hope for tomorrow.